Ale, Alleluia, 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 Alleluia. No one who sets a hand to the plow and looks to what was left behind is fit for the kingdom of God. Alleluia, 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 Alleluia.
Our God is with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Christ.
As the time approached when he was to be taken from this world, Jesus firmly resolved to proceed toward Jerusalem, and he sent messengers on ahead. They entered a Samaritan town to prepare for his reception there, but the Samaritans would not welcome Jesus because his destination was Jerusalem. When the disciples James and John saw this, they said, "Rabbi, do you want us to call down fire from heaven and destroy them?" But Jesus turned and reprimanded them. Then they set off for another town. As they were making their way along, they met a fellow traveler who said to Jesus, "I will be your follower wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have lairs, the birds of the sky have nests, but the chosen one has nowhere to rest." To another, Jesus said, "Follow me." The traveler replied, "Let me bury my father first." Jesus said in return, "Let the dead bury their dead. You go and proclaim the reign of God everywhere." Yet another traveler approached Jesus in this same way. "I will be your follower, Rabbi, but first let me say goodbye to my people at home." Jesus answered, "Whoever puts a hand to the plow but keeps looking back is unfit for the reign of God." Sisters and brothers, the good news of salvation.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Let me say farewell to my family at home. Well, if you do, you're unfit for the kingdom. Let me go bury my father. Let the dead bury their dead. In my mid-20s, my first job after college was in the northern suburbs of Chicago, near where I had grown up. And the opportunity came for me to transfer to Pennsylvania, where I had never been. In fact, I had never been much of anywhere. So I decided to take the opportunity because it felt like a great adventure at a time when I thought I had nothing to lose or leave behind. So I said my farewells and headed out on the road 700 miles east. I did keep in touch with home. I visited regularly, people came and visited me, and life was good. Then one evening the following year, I got a call from a friend who told me that our mutual friend, Jeff, had been killed in a car versus train accident. He was 21 years old. And Jeff was very dear to all of us. And for the first time, I felt like I just couldn't be so far away. I had to be there. So fortunately, I was able to make it back for the funeral. That was in mid-December. One morning in early January, I got a phone call at work from one of my brothers. He said that our father had been hit by a car while crossing the street on his way to work, and he was dead. So I found myself ordering another plane ticket back to Chicago for a funeral, my second within 1 month. So I understand people's need and desire to say their goodbyes. So today's gospel is hard for me. I treasure the opportunity to say goodbye because too often in my life I've been denied that. So, with a knot in my stomach, I read these readings and thought, what could I possibly have to say about this? What I do know is to not take the words that were written down at face value. In context, it likely made a whole lot more sense 2,000 years ago than a literal reading would today. Though I could imagine Jesus maybe saying something unexpected about someone's father, because people bringing up issues of Jesus' paternity are well documented. But at the same time, he often had his mother and family members traveling with him. So clearly, he's not speaking against the fourth commandment. We do have in all three readings today the theme of plowing and that of the yoke. That's in all three. And I chuckle when I read about Elisha. He asked for and received permission to say goodbye to his family. Imagine his parents' response at the news that Elijah was passing the mantle of prophet on to him. So you did what to the herd and the plowing equipment? I bet Elisha's parents had no qualms about being rid of him after that. They probably told Elijah, take him before we kill him. But it's similar to legends about burning the boats. Conquerors travel to distant shores, then tell their men to burn the boats. Victory or death are our only options. The story of Elisha is an illustration of what it means to abandon who we thought we were, to become something new in God. It's an example of giving ourselves completely to God, to becoming a new person, on a new path in service to God and to others. This is the way for Elisha now. And Paul believed that the day of cosmic change was at hand. It was therefore not necessary, he says, for Gentiles to fully convert to Judaism and learn and live all by all precepts of the law, because that would be looking backward. Rather, live as righteous Gentiles, living and looking forward to the coming reign of God. In our Benedictine tradition, we practice Lectio Divina, a meditative way of reading and opening ourselves to what God is trying to say to us, listening with the ear of the heart, as we say. If you're doing it right, one phrase, even one word, speaks to you. And that's how I know I'm still not doing it right, because I usually have way too many words and thoughts bouncing around in my brain as I read. So there are two messages from today's gospel that speak to me for us to unpack together. They are the notions of Jesus sending word ahead of his arrival and the people's response of not being ready and of looking back, of actually plowing backwards. Jesus is known to speak with urgency, like his cousin John before him and Paul and Benedict after them. Urgency runs through the rule of Saint Benedict, saying that while there is still time, we must run and do now what will profit us forever. Jesus sent messengers ahead to those villages, the disciples, and before them, generations of prophets. And when Jesus got there, they weren't ready. Let me just take care of this, or let me go do that first. We know of burial practices from that time that it was a year-long process to properly mourn and bury someone. But Jesus is gathering 72 followers to become leaders and go forth and proclaim the good news everywhere. Ready to go? He asks. Be ready when he comes. That's the message. We also hear from Jesus Paul's theme that no one who looks to what is behind is fit for God's kingdom. I don't know much about farming, but I do know that you don't plow the straight rows of corn that Sharon's father demanded by looking backwards. Live looking forward. After my friend Jeff died, I especially reached out to our friend Chris, who was Jeff's best friend. The two of them had grown up together since the age of 5. And Chris is quiet, so I made an extra effort to support him during such a hard time in his young life. I became a pen pal and a more active part of his support system. And he and I grew closer than we had ever been or ever would have if I had kept plowing backward by only mourning the loss of Jeff. I needed to look forward to what was being asked of me in the new reality. Sometime later, I confided in Chris that I had initially worried whether he would despair trying to imagine life without Jeff and what he might do. And his answer was, "Don't worry. I don't think about that anymore." So maybe my plowing forward and nourishing that relationship with Chris helped a little with that. For what is the reign of God if not a beloved community where those who mourn are blessed and comforted? We weren't ready for Jeff's death, but thankfully we didn't turn our backs on life either. And that helped me to deal with my father's sudden death less than a month later as well. For Jesus, the consequences of the Samaritan villagers' actions or inactions are enough. Does he punish the villagers? No. Jesus turns and rebukes his disciples because earlier in Luke, he was telling the disciples the type of Messiah he was and what kinds of disciples they needed to be. There's so much we can undertake by living looking forward in the freedom that Paul describes, rather than looking backward to punish ourselves or others. Prior to today's gospel reading about being fit or ready for God's reign, Luke describes the mission of the 12, the casting out of demons, and Jesus predicting what glory was going to look like for him. He knew his days were numbered. Live urgently. Look forward. Be prepared. So in closing, it reminds me of a question that our bishop often poses, and I think it's especially meaningful for today's readings. Emmaus is a caring and gifted community. We even talked on Pentecost about the many gifts that we all have. So in the ongoing process of discerning what message Jesus is sending ahead of his arrival, what are some things we need to prepare for? Individually, as a church, as a diocese, to be fit, to be ready to accept or help usher in the coming reign of God. My friend Jeff died almost 30 years ago, and the story isn't really about what happened then, but what it means now. What messengers or message is Jesus sending ahead of his arrival now? What preparations am I making or delaying making in my life? Where am I plowing backward? So that what can I do to become the prophet that Elisha called, to live in the freedom that Paul describes, so that I'm ready to be that disciple when Jesus comes and simply says, "Follow me."